Whether it's the crisp taste of Pepsi, the tangy flavor of Mountain Dew, or a bit of energy in Amp Energy, PepsiCo without question has quenched the thirst of NASCAR fans for decades, whether it was watching on TV or if it was at the track on a hot summer day. They have been a strong influence, a strong force in NASCAR's marketing, and that includes myself in a big way. I mean, just take a look at these Pinewood Derby cars I made in my childhood. This one right here I raced in 2011, and it was one of my favorites, especially with the Jeff Gordon number and the classic Pepsi logo on the hood. Then in my final year, I raced the Championship Dew Crew scheme with Dale Jr.'s number, and you can see on the back here I snuck in a Pepsi logo after I had some leftover stickers from the year before. Pepsi and Mountain Dew were also my choices of beverage on race day, whether it was Cherry Pepsi, whether it was Mountain Dew Baja Blast, and whether it was some of these special flavors like Dew SA, Liberty Brew, and even the Berry Pepsi that came out in 2019. Pepsi has been a very prominent company in NASCAR until the past few years. If you've attended a NASCAR race in recent years and you've bought a burger or brought from the concession stands, chances are you hear this often in the concourses at a NASCAR track.
Cheeseburger. No fries, chips, and no Pepsi Coke.
It's been a sad realization that a company that was a big part of my childhood is now basically non-existent in NASCAR. Now, as I aforementioned, it has only felt like this in recent years, but after putting this video together, Pepsi's eventual NASCAR Soda Wars loss to Coca-Cola goes all the way back a few decades, in fact. A few big factors and some bad luck led to the fizzling out of the second biggest soda company in the United States here in NASCAR. It should be a surprise to nobody that Pepsi Cola has a strong history in NASCAR since almost the very beginning back in 1949. North Carolina, in fact, is the very state where pharmacist Caleb Bradham in 1893 created what was known as Brad's drink at the time. It would then be another 5 years until it was renamed to Pepsi, primarily to symbolize it as a drink to aid digestion. So with its roots in the South, Pepsi was able to have a strong presence in a regional sport with various drivers, paint schemes, and with that came strong success in NASCAR's simpler days. At the Darlington Raceway for Labor Day weekend 1969, Roy Tyner carried the colors of the Carolina Pepsi brothers, and this would mark as the first ever race sponsored by Pepsi. Then on August 1st, 1971, Pepsi won its first ever NASCAR Cup race when Richard Petty drove his Petty Enterprises Plymouth to victory lane for the 1971 Dixie 500. Later that year, Tiny Lund would win the second race for Pepsi at North Wilkesboro. The first full season, meanwhile, a Pepsi-related sponsorship was with Lenny Pond adorning the Pepsi colors throughout the entirety of 1976. He would come on strong during the second half of the season and score 2 second-place finishes at Rockingham in Ontario. Then, after a couple years off, it wouldn't be until the 1981 season where we would see PepsiCo re-emerge into the NASCAR sponsorship game, this time with a young hotshot under the name of Darrell Waltrip. His personality fit well with the sugary, caffeinated beverage known as Mountain Dew, with the pair winning 24 races and 2 championships together over the next 2 years. For 1983, PepsiCo returned, but the Dew Crew was no more. Unlike almost every sponsorship decision in present day, the change was not prompted by PepsiCo themselves. As recollected by Darrell Waltrip, team owner Junior Johnson wanted an increase in sponsorship, which at the time Mountain Dew just wasn't as big as Pepsi. With more money and a bigger budget, the Pepsi brand came back to NASCAR with this white and yellow Pepsi Challenger. Now what didn't change was the winning. The Pepsi Challenger won 6 races that season, albeit Darrell Waltrip would come up short of a Pepsi three-peat. All of this was done while competitor Coke was largely absent outside of a half-decade of Bobby Allison with the Coke colors in the early 1970s and a few one-off races after that. Now, you oldies out there may be questioning why I haven't mentioned Gatorade, which ironically sponsored Waltrip in the 5 years prior to moving to Junior Johnson's team and spent 8 years in the sport. The reason why? At the time, Gatorade was not a part of the PepsiCo umbrella of brands and products. They would remain separated until 2001, where in that year, PepsiCo purchased the Quaker Oats Company for $13 billion in order to add Gatorade to its portfolio. It should be no surprise, the main incentive to add Gatorade was to counter Powerade, which was, you guessed it, owned by the Coca-Cola Company. Now, once the days of DW were numbered when Anheuser-Busch ultimately took over the 11 car for the 1984 season, things would get awfully quiet on the Pepsi side of things for a little bit. In the early 90s, Coca-Cola was beating them thanks to Kyle Petty succeeding with the Coca-Cola-owned Mellow Yellow brand on his Pontiac. Now, Pepsi did have some endorsement deals with Richard Petty even after his retirement, and Pepsi was the official soft drink of NASCAR. Even then, Pepsi's involvement was and had always had more of a regional feel. After all, NASCAR was still at the time a predominantly southern sport and had yet to hit its national stride. Albeit, there was one kid from California that was changing the guard and the perception of NASCAR for the better. I'm not going to sugarcoat this one. It was a 25-year-old named Jeff Gordon. A driver, in fact, that raced a Diet Pepsi midget in his 1990 USAC season. One that saw him win a national championship. Upon his entrance in Cup, he wouldn't rep those same colors and hold that same beverage. In fact, Hendrick Motorsports was a Coca-Cola team during his first championship, and during that season, Coke had some pretty big ad space on the deck lid of his DuPont Monte Carlo. The only thing, at least for me, that would be weirder than this would be Yadier Molina playing an inning of baseball in a Cubs jersey. That's how weird the Jeff Gordon and Coca-Cola combination feels. It should also be no surprise Jeff Gordon had a hard time whenever he encountered Ron Faust, a Pepsi employee he had met through Gordon's ex-wife, Brooke Seeley. If she was useful for anything, you can thank her for getting Jeff some ties with Pepsi. Now, after some debate, Jeff Gordon finally decided to give Pepsi a chance after Coca-Cola wanted to market him on a regional level. That was a stark contrast from Pepsi, who was gathering together a national ad campaign with various athletes from almost every single sport you can think of, except racing. Now, Jeff Gordon, throughout all this, he almost hesitated and backed out due to a busy schedule. But nonetheless, he boarded an airplane to New York and was impressed with what Pepsi had to offer after their first meeting. They believed in NASCAR and its fan base, and they were excited about it. They really wanted to really get behind it and support it from a marketing standpoint. And that was something we were lacking. They said, hey, let's do some big things here. It was a national opportunity Jeff Gordon just could not resist. And with that, he was officially a part of the Pepsi team. The first big-time Pepsi moment with Jeff Gordon was this wacky ad during the 1998 Super Bowl.
Gordon is way behind. Stick a fork in Jeff. He's done. Oh, my. What is he thinking? Oof. Holy baloo. What the heck is that?
Ooh, that's gotta hurt.
Well, what could possess a man to drive like that?
Gotcha.
He's making his move backward. Gordon wins.
We gotta get him a cup holder. Pepsi, Generation Next.
This ad aired in front of 133.4 million people and was arguably one of the early times that sparked Jeff Gordon and NASCAR's presence on the national stage. It was evident Pepsi's swift move at the forefront of NASCAR was a move ripened for success. Howbeit, with Pepsi discovering a new area to market itself in, you just knew Coca-Cola would not be too far behind, and they would strike back in a big way. On October 9th, 1997, it was announced that Coca-Cola would replace Pepsi as NASCAR's official soft drink. This would be the beginning of a 5-year deal that paired NASCAR and Coke together for specially created advertising, in-store displays, packaging and promotions, and signature NASCAR and Coca-Cola licensed merchandise. Also, it was the 1998 season, to my knowledge, that Coca-Cola began its relationship with a brand new driver. I mean, it isn't anyone too special. It's just the guy in the black car that not only was the active wins leader with 7 championships, but the rival to the Rainbow Warrior, whether it was Charlotte, Rockingham, or now Las Vegas. Not to mention, this guy had arguably the biggest and most diehard fan base in the entire sport. Nothing too special. Sure, Coca-Cola was now the officially licensed soft drink of NASCAR, and Pepsi had an intimidating fan base on the red side of the Color Wars, but let us not forget Pepsi's strong presence still in the NASCAR Cup Series. They still had Jeff Gordon, who was now a 2-time Cup Series champion. They still had the vendor rights to 14 of the 20 NASCAR Cup Series tracks, and they had 2 sponsored race events. In fact, Pepsi was still bullish on the wonderful sport of auto racing and the NASCAR series, with Pepsi spokesperson Brad Shaw stating, "Coke finally woke up and realized what a great sport NASCAR is, but they are starting out a few laps behind us." Pepsi would continue its national presence with more incredible ads and a return to NASCAR sponsorship with Jeff Gordon in the then called NASCAR Busch Series, winning 2 races with the Pepsi colors at Phoenix in 1999 and Homestead in 2000. Thanks to an expanded schedule from 34 to 36 races for the 2001 season, that left 2 unsponsored races in Cup for Jeff Gordon that wouldn't run the recognizable new flame scheme introduced for the new season. Both races would be awarded to Pepsi. They would get the rights to Spring Talladega and the Daytona race on 4th of July weekend. Of course, this race was already under the entitlement of Pepsi. Only this time the race would not only feature a special paint scheme with Jeff Gordon in that race, but it would also be broadcasted by NBC, which was in fact their first ever live NASCAR race ever. This would lead to some massive opportunities for Pepsi on its NASCAR frontier. They would market the hottest pop star at the time, who was a spokesperson for Pepsi, alongside its champion NASCAR driver in promotional ads for the race. This would catch the attention of many casual or non-NASCAR fans throughout the many programs that aired on NBC leading up to the race. So with the hype around it, which included the storyline of Dale Earnhardt Jr. returning to Daytona, it should be no surprise that this race crushed in the TV ratings like a frat bro after chugging a few cans of Pepsi. The race saw a 41% increase compared to the 2000 edition on CBS and became the highest watched primetime race of the new TV deal. And you want to know the race it bested? The Coca-Cola 600 on Fox earlier in the year. Talk about irony. Also during 2001, PepsiCo beverage Mountain Dew inked a sponsorship deal with Evernham Motorsports. Over the next 5 seasons, they would sponsor 9 races with drivers such as Casey Atwood, Casey Kane, and Jeremy Mayfield. This marked as Mountain Dew's first Cup endeavor since Bill Schmidt ran 5 Mountain Dew races at Riverside from 1982 to 1984. All while Coca-Cola during this time had to regroup from the loss of Dale Earnhardt. But still, they did a decent job sticking in there with its drivers from the Coca-Cola racing family and the Coca-Cola 600. Eventually, they would try to take over the 2004 Pepsi 400 by running 8, yes, I said that right, 8 paint schemes sporting the new Coca-Cola C2. They tried, but once again, Jeff Gordon's Pepsi Chevrolet was just too much for them to handle. With his win, Gordon won the Pepsi 400 for the first time with Pepsi sponsorship and won America Free Pepsi Edge. After the battle, Jeff Gordon talked about defeating the Coke cans in his victory speech.
I want to thank DuPont, especially want to thank them for allowing Pepsi to do this program, this win $1 billion, play for $1 billion, and what a big day for Pepsi, man. We had a bunch of those red cars for some reason. I don't know what they were, but they were in my way, so it was pretty awesome to finish ahead of them.
I'll have to go further into this race sometime because without a doubt, it was the greatest display of Cola Wars in NASCAR's history. If you guys leave a like on the video, I'll be sure to do it sooner than later. On top of going back-to-back in the Talladega Spring Race, Pepsi was undefeated for 433 days as a primary sponsor for a NASCAR Cup Series car. And I'll tell you, the 2000 saw such great Pepsi paint schemes hit the track for Jeff Gordon, such as this beauty that won the 2003 Aaron's 499. Tossing beer cans at this car should have been a criminal offense because it was such a beauty. Then for 2005, who could forget this car that mixed some beautiful glossy Pepsi blue with black? As you can see, I also have this car in the 1/24 scale, and might I say, this car is not only marvelous as a diecast, but it is marvelous as a paint scheme. Finally, we had the first Flames Pepsi scheme, which was absolutely fantastic. They take the DuPont design and absolutely crush it with the black and blue. In that season's Pepsi 400, it was a standout in the field of 43. What would also stand out is the fact that this would be the final Pepsi 400 and lead to the next major domino in Pepsi's NASCAR downfall. On July 9, 2007, Coca-Cola struck a multi-million-dollar deal with the International Speedway Corporation to take over the vending rights at 10 of its 13 owned tracks over the next few years. The most notable acquisition was the famed Daytona International Speedway and its summer race previously sponsored by Pepsi. Because of its new journey with Coke, it would end a 50-year partnership with Pepsi and Daytona. Some of the other tracks that would officially flip from blue to red in 2008 alongside Daytona would be Chicagoland, Homestead, Kansas, Richmond, and Michigan. It was another track Pepsi had great ties with, as it was the title sponsor of the second Michigan race from 1998 to 2002. Losing these tracks right here happened to be a devastating blow for Pepsi, especially in markets like Daytona, Chicago, and Miami, where they can officially promote the race alongside the speedway at local Walmarts and grocery stores on that given race weekend. Coca-Cola sucker punched Pepsi so hard that you could see a bit more red than usual. PepsiCo would need to find itself a new NASCAR fix to counteract, and my, they would find a big move to counteract to Coca-Cola over the next few months. In September of that same year, they would strike a deal to become the co-primary sponsor of NASCAR's most popular driver, Dale Earnhardt Jr., in his new ride at Hendrick Motorsports. PepsiCo would use the highly coveted hood space to promote its Amp Energy brand. It was marketed as an extension to the Mountain Dew brand upon its introduction in 2001, but it still hadn't had many mainstream opportunities. Of course, outside a couple one-off races with Kevin LePage. Now, with a driver like Dale Jr., you knew the word would be out in a big way. In fact, I remember as a 7-year-old kid, I begged my mom to go to Target and get the new Dale Jr. Amp Energy 164, a car that just had this beautiful sparkly green to it, and it was one I just could not resist. I also remember getting an Amp Energy remote control, and they even had some Dale Jr. shirts at Target that had the Amp Energy logo. Yeah, that's how popular NASCAR was in the 2000s. It's crazy, I know, right? Meanwhile, for the older crowd, Dale Earnhardt Jr. would star in a few ads for Amp Energy that carried on the intrigue and cleverness Pepsi had to offer with Jeff Gordon. This one, for me at least, was the most memorable of the bunch.
Race car driver feels 800 pounds of force at every turn. How does Dale Jr. overcome it? Energy focused control. Amp yourself.
Sweet mother.
Still, while the Amp Energy move was a success and PepsiCo had arguably the two most marketable NASCAR drivers in the series, the original ISC deal would see their track count on the decrease. For 2009, the Darlington Raceway officially switched to Coca-Cola beverages for its annual Southern 500. Once a race that featured the sponsorship of Mountain Dew from 1992 to 1997, and again from 2001 to 2004, and Pepsi in 1998 to 2000. 2 years later, Watkins Glen and Talladega would flip red and serve up the likes of Coca-Cola, Sprite, and Mellow Yellow at its vendors. With losing Talladega, they also lost their entitlement sponsorship of the, at the time, Amp Energy 500, which ran from 2008 to 2010. Then in the same year, Pepsi driver Jeff Gordon tangled with Clint Boyer on the track. Coca-Cola was serving refreshments to fans off of it. Also, at some point in the timeline, Pepsi lost the Auto Club Speedway. They, like the Martinsville Speedway, left an opportunity for Pepsi to negotiate for a new deal once the current deal was up, which ultimately failed. Possibly the reason for this was the loss of the Auto Club Speedway's second date, which was at the time sponsored by Pepsi. This was also significant for another reason. The 2010 chase would be significant for Pepsi in the fact that the Pepsi Max 400 at Auto Club would be the final Pepsi-sponsored race, and the Amp Energy 500 would end PepsiCo's entitlement sponsorships altogether. Check that, that would be their last sponsored points-paying races, as they still had the Gatorade Duel, which would ultimately end in 2012. There would also be a shift in the marketing of Dale Earnhardt Jr. as Diet Mountain Dew would become the primary colors over the Amp brand. Now, despite having primary sponsorship for half the season and the rear bumper of Dale Jr.'s 88 for every National Guard race, Amp Energy and Mountain Dew didn't see a lot of screen time in the actual races. From 2008 to 2012, Dale Jr. only won twice. One with the Amp Energy colors and the other with primarily Dark Knight branding outside of the side of the car. In between that time, Dale Jr. struggled to win and even stay consistent as he failed to finish in the top 20 in the point standings for the 2009 and 2010 seasons. Suddenly, sponsoring Dale Jr. had lost a bit of its novelty, and it would lead to some corporate heads doing some businessing in the upcoming years. Prior to the 2013 season, Dale Earnhardt Jr. confirmed that Mountain Dew would cut back its sponsorship. PepsiCo would now sponsor just 5 races for Dale Jr., but it would add a race with Kasey Kahne to its deal. Meanwhile, Jeff Gordon would continue his 2 annual races with Pepsi dating back to 2001, and Jimmy Johnson continued his endorsement deal with Gatorade. Now, even with the reduction of races from 2013 to 2014, I have to say these next 2 years were some of the most fun and energizing years of PepsiCo's NASCAR partnership without a question. On the Pepsi side, Jeff Gordon went viral for his role as an undercover driver in the Test Drive series. In his first video, he takes a salesman on an insane drive through the parking lot, and his reactions were priceless.
Oh, you're an idiot! I'm gonna kill you! Oh, stop! Oh, God Almighty!
Then in the sequel, a year later, Jeff Gordon and Pepsi Max set out to prove that the original test drive was in fact real, something Jalopnik rider Travis Okulski didn't believe.
Sorry, man!
Now, whether these videos were real or not, this was in my opinion the peak of Jeff Gordon's tenure with Pepsi. These videos were fun, and it was really the first time Pepsi brought out the personality and character inside Jeff Gordon.
Oh, damn it! This is not what I need. Oh! No way is this happening! This can't not be happening!
It was also cool in the fact that it was an advertisement a bit different from the NASCAR guard. It was showcasing the driver doing NASCAR type things in everyday conditions. On the Mountain Dew side, Dale Earnhardt Jr. made a Super Bowl appearance with the Dale Call, a clever spoof on the duck call that ended up getting produced in the open market. Unfortunately, I never got a chance to own one of these, but I'll tell you there were some creative geniuses at PepsiCo in that time frame, and they put out some memorable ads. Meanwhile, for the 2015 season, Pepsi would lose one of its independent tracks in the Pocono Raceway to Coca-Cola. But of course, that wasn't the biggest thing in that season for PepsiCo. Not with the driver that got them on the NASCAR map officially retiring and ending an 18-year partnership together. The final race for Pepsi as a primary sponsor with Jeff Gordon was the 2015 Fall Phoenix race, finishing a respectable 6th place and leading 4 laps on the shortened race. Albeit it was only for 30 races, Jeff Gordon had some pretty good numbers, whether it was the traditional blue Pepsi colors or the black Pepsi Max from 2010 to 2014. Not only would this end an era with Jeff Gordon, but it would end an era for Pepsi in NASCAR period. Since Jeff Gordon's final race in 2015, a Pepsi logo hasn't been on a real NASCAR stock car or truck since. This was the case because for the new era, Pepsi would utilize the regular Mountain Dew colors for Dale Earnhardt Jr., Chase Elliott, and Kasey Kahne for the upcoming 2016 season. Also around this time, there would be just 3 Mountain Dew races for Dale Jr., which included PepsiCo's version of the Coca-Cola C2 race that season. For the 2016 spring race at Richmond, Mountain Dew promoted its Dewcision 2016, where fans would choose a brand new flavor to join the primary roster. Either Baja Blast, which was sported on rookie Chase Elliott's Chevy SS, or Pitch Black, which was rep by Kasey Kahne. This intriguing ad aired during the spring, and as for the competition, Kasey Kahne and Pitch Black won on the track and eventually in the contest. Although, I gotta say this, Pitch Black is not my Mountain Dew, and the 2016 Dewcision was rigged. This would prove to be one of the final bright spots of Pepsi's NASCAR journey. As Sprint walked away from the NASCAR Cup entitlement sponsorship, there was a vacancy that needed to be filled. The company that would fill the void would be Monster Energy, which was, you guessed it, owned by Coca-Cola. As part of the new agreement, Monster Energy would get the windshield spaces previously held by the driver names. So pretty much every race car in the field was sponsored by Coca-Cola in some way, including all 4 Hendrick cars. Due to their deal with Pepsi, Hendrick only used the Monster Energy logos when they absolutely had to, on the driver fire suits and on the cars themselves. Pepsi that year would also lose the vending rights to the Bristol Motor Speedway. Coca-Cola now obtained, and still has today, vendor rights to every single Speedway Motorsports owned track, including COTA last weekend. And for the final caffeine crash back to reality, Dale Earnhardt Jr. retired. His final on-track numbers were better than Jeff Gordon's in some areas, primarily because he had more races. Still, Dale Jr. was a great ambassador for PepsiCo, and he helped them bring recognition to AMP Energy. If Pepsi would have left Hendrick Motorsports completely after 2017, honestly, I would have 100% understood, considering they were backed into a pretty tight corner entering the 2018 season. They had a very small presence in the sport compared to Coca-Cola, and there really weren't many directions they could go except with Hendrick Motorsports. Nonetheless, they surprisingly renewed. Beginning in 2018 and through 2020, Mountain Dew would sponsor Chase Elliott in 4 races annually. They were also originally slated to sponsor Alex Bowman in some capacity, considering he had Mountain Dew logos on his car for the Hendrick 2018 paint scheme unveil. However, at some point they must have pulled out because the Mountain Dew logos would never appear on any of Alex Bowman's race cars. For the next 3 years, the only positives to Mountain Dew's presence were the paint schemes and the 2 victories by Chase. The first one coming at the Kansas Speedway, which gave Mountain Dew its first victory as the sole primary sponsor since the days of Darrell Waltrip. Then in 2019, with a Little Caesars colors, Chase Elliott won at Talladega. On that afternoon, you would have thought you were in Chase country, much like the previous Dew driver Dale Jr. Other than that, their advertisements got really stale. Despite having Chase Elliott right there, they wouldn't use him in advertisements in favor of using a fullback driver, Dewey Ryder, replacing the great Dale Jr. When they did use Chase, he was the token NASCAR driver, that was it. Mountain Dew further amplified the stereotype that Chase Elliott was one of the most vanilla drivers in NASCAR.
Hey! Chase Elliott! Nice car.
Thanks.
You don't even have one door.
Doorless. You got me.
So finally we reached 2020, a very chaotic year. And I must say there is both good news and bad news. The good news is Monster Energy's time as NASCAR title sponsor was over. Thus, there would be no more Coca-Cola related advertisements on a Pepsi-sponsored car. The bad news is Coca-Cola officially became one of the premier partners of the NASCAR Cup Series. They would get branding at every single NASCAR track, including tracks that sold Pepsi products such as Martinsville and Dover. Coca-Cola also got the sponsorship of the NASCAR Salutes program in the summer and the awarding of the regular season championship. As for the season, they would get their annual 4 races with Chase Elliott, 2 of which were wrecks and the other 2 were decent top 10 outings. That included the first Dover race on August 22, 2020. Sporting a Team Rubicon look, Chase Elliott led 27 laps and had a very solid 5th place run after 311 laps. It was a fitting conclusion to one era, which the 2020 NASCAR Cup season later that year ending with Mountain Dew driver Chase Elliott capturing the season championship. It would be the first time since 2001 that a Pepsi-sponsored driver won the championship. It would also prove to be the final race in Cup that a Pepsi-related product would be on a NASCAR stock car. As the calendar struck midnight to begin a new year, the partnership with Hendrick Motorsports that began on a quick decision by Jeff Gordon would reach its end nearly a quarter century later. As of May 2021, here's the scorecard of the NASCAR Soda Wars. Coca-Cola is the official fan refreshment of NASCAR, has rights to every SMI track and all but one ISC track, is the entitlement sponsor for the Coca-Cola 600 this weekend and the Coke Zero 400, arguably 2 of the biggest races of the year, the NASCAR Salutes program, the Coca-Cola racing family that includes 2 of the top drivers, Joey Logano and Denny Hamlin, the sponsorship of the regular season championship, and the official premier partner of NASCAR. They also have a team partnership with JTG Doherty Racing and Kroger, which will see them get co-sponsorship for a few races, including this weekend with Ryan Preece. On the blue side of the aisle, Pepsi has track deals at Martinsville, Dover, Indianapolis, and Road America. That's it. The only other presence was a one-off throwback race in the Xfinity Series with Michael Annett, marking as the first Gatorade-sponsored race under PepsiCo. Considering Coke's stranglehold on the market and the deal Pepsi struck with LeBron James recently, I doubt Pepsi is coming back anytime soon. At the end of the day, there were a variety of reasons why Pepsi lost NASCAR's Soda Wars, and they all add up into one thesis. Coca-Cola was able to wedge in before Pepsi's NASCAR empire slammed shut on Coke. Over time, Pepsi saw its NASCAR empire slowly get chipped away by Coca-Cola year after year, and once they had the official everything of NASCAR and a majority of the tracks, it was all over. Especially as Pepsi's creative geniuses and star power evacuated from the castle. It is a rarity for either Pepsi or Coke to gain an absolute stranglehold on its enemy, especially in sports leagues where 30 individual decisions are made instead of about 5. In this case, NASCAR is the one area where Pepsi was absolutely crushed. So anyways, this is NRF signing out, and just remember, life's a beach and then you drive.